Hi, this is Zach with Worn&Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Alpina Startimer Pilot Manufacturer Watch. Alpina is a cool brand. They've been around in one form or another since the late 1800s, actually. They're kind of a major sports watch brand at some point kind of leading up to the 60s, and they got hit really bad by the quartz crisis of the 70s and 80s and kind of became defunct. Frederick Constant took the brand over in the early 2000s and has been rebuilding it as a really interesting brand that I think has a kind of a niche unto themselves, as does Frederick Constant. So it's definitely a sport brand focus. You have big pilots watches, big adventure style watches, dive watches, things like that, larger cases. And like the Frederick Constant brand, one of the exceptional things they do is offer in-house manufacture movements at a much more accessible price point. So this watch, the Startimer Pilot Manufacturer, features a Frederick Constant manufactured automatic movement, and the watch costs $2,500. And like the Frederick Constants, that is certainly more than what we normally talk about. But once again, for what you're getting, this is less than half the price of your next manufacturer movement pilot watch of this style. So you're really getting really good value for what you have here. And they also have pilot watches that are smaller and cost less and have Salida movements, things like that. So this is a range, and this just shows kind of the top of the range, but it's a very interesting watch. The looks of the watch, very clearly a modern pilot watch, very closely resembles, you might as well just get it out there, watches by IWC, the Mark series. But there's a little bit of a spin on it. You have some different details here and there. But overall, it just gets that modern, aggressive Flieger watch across, and it's just really kind of cool. The case of the Alpina Startimer Pilot Watch it's got this classic large pilot design to it. It has very familiar curves and angles to it, but when you get in and look at the details, I think there's actually a lot going on here that makes it interesting, as well as just a nice little finish all around. So it's a 44 millimeter case, so quite large, about 53 millimeters lug to lug. 13.5 millimeters tall, and that includes the dome sapphire crystal there with 22 millimeter lugs here. Yeah, it's quite a large case, but that's definitely a type of pilot design, and I think actually the watch wears much better than I at least expected from a 44 millimeter case design. I think it's actually quite comfortable. You have this massive crown coming off here at 3. It's kind of an onion style, but it really just tapers out and then cuts off bluntly. I would really like the design there. It's a very nicely little detailed crown too. You have these big deep grooves, some brushing around the side, then polishing within the grooves, and then on the end here you have this Alpina triangle logo in like a nicely deeply etched area. So I mean, that piece alone is just quite beautiful. Then looking at the case itself, I mean, like I said, you have this classic pilot geometry, but you have a nice level finish around. So you've got brushing going on the top surface here. Then you look at the side, and hopefully the camera's picking this up. You have brushing, horizontal brushing here, then this really beautiful beveled edge and polished steel on both sides. And that's actually a really cool little detail. I think largely some of these bevels, they usually a sharper angle, which, is very acceptable and totally nice, but what they did here is they kept it really, really shallow, so it just kind of, almost like seamlessly flows out of the brush, that you get this really nice polished edge. And I think that really just ups the elegance of the design a lot. It's really nice. It also just adds a little bit of a glint here. Then the bezel has a kind of a tall bezel that steps in and just comes straight out. So there's a nice kind of like jagged geometry there, a little bit of kind of an architectural sense, which I think just builds off of the whole, aggressive Flieger look nicely. Then that's brushed around and polished on the top surface. So once again, you just have a nice little mix of finishing there that just comes through really nice. So, on top of being a sport watch, I think you can spend time, look at the details, and, that just speaks to the $2,500 price and that you're getting, I think, a solid watch for that. Now, flipping it over, excuse me while I undo this quickly. You can take a look at the case back here, in which you can see the manufacturer movement, which we'll talk about more later. It's got a nice smaller window than we saw on the slimline moon phase, but I think that's actually cool on how it frames the movement. And this deeply etched area with some details about the watch. Just a very simple, but I think a nicely executed presentation there. The dial of the Startimer Pilot Manufacturer, as I said before, is this really kind of typical modern Flieger pilot watch vis-a-vis the IWC Mark series. You'll see some things here that I think are very close to what they did, but then a couple little unique flourishes here that I do think give it its own personality, though it's just clear where the inspirations came from. So looking at the dial now, this dial is actually, there's two options. You can get an all black dial, or you can get this Anthracite Sunburst dial, which I think is particularly gorgeous. It's a very dark gray with a little bit of a sunburst in it. I think it just is a little more elegant than black if you're going for something that perhaps that's a little bit less of just like a genuine Flieger sport watch kind of thing. And it just, it just has kind of a nice charm to it that I think works very nice with steel, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I have this one major index here of numerals. They're applied numerals, very big, very, very clear, well balanced. So, you have these 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11. The 5 and the 7 here do get cut off by this subdial, which we'll talk about in a second. And then around it all, you have an applied chapter ring. I love the look of this. Just even though it's not very thick, that little bit of a step down to the dial just gives it more depth, more texture. The little bit of the contrast, because the materiality on that isn't quite the same as it is on the Sunburst Center there, so you get a little bit of contrast. It looks great, really, really legible. I love the 12, 3, and 9 markers here. They come in, they create a little bit of like a crosshair look to the dial. It's just all great, very, very, very well balanced. And now looking at the massive pointer date complication here at 6, it's kind of, I think, a bit of a signature for the Frederick Constant and / Alpina manufacturer movements is this small pointer date. I first saw the watch like in a picture. I totally expect that to be a sub-second style, especially given the size. But it's kind of an interesting thing to have. Is it necessarily the most useful on a Flieger watch to have a massive date there? Perhaps not, but I do think it adds to the symmetry of the watch, and I think it's very well executed. It's so big and bold. It's really making a statement there. Adds some complexity because the numbers in it are quite large, and then the subdial itself also has circular graining, so it has its own little sunbursting going on. So it has a very, very cool effect, and obviously you have at-a-glance readability for the date. Looking at the hands now quickly, you have these kind of more elegantly formed leaf-shaped hands. I think Flieger watches typically have the more Roman sword hands. Here they went for something a little bit more smooth. Definitely a bit of a unique detail for the Alpina watches. I think they look very, very nice. They're very, very clean and easy, to read. I think it was a good choice in the handset. Then the second hand is just a stick second hand with this red detail on the back. Which is the Alpina logo, which is just a triangle. But I really actually like what that does there. It's a subtle hint of color. There's a little bit of a kind of focal point, though. It's not too loud. It's not distracting. It's just like a little flourish for fun. One thing that was a little bit of a disappointment about this watch was that the loom is not very potent. You do have loom in the numbers here in the hands, especially in the numbers. It's a very thin area. It's a little bit dotty. It just isn't as strong as I'd like it. I mean, granted, this isn't a dive watch, and I really in the end of the day, Flieger watches are largely kind of a business casual kind of sporty watch. But I do think strong loom just would have made it more authentic, perhaps. The feature that really sets the Startimer pilot manufacturer apart from the competition is the manufacturer movement, along with the $2,500 price tag. So like the Frederick Constant slimline movement phase we looked at last week, you have this really beautifully decorated, executed, and designed movement. And I think there's actually something they did something really interesting with the Alpina in their decoration, I think, to stick with the branding a little bit more. So although it's very decorated, it still comes across as, I think, as masculine, or more masculine, more aggressive, and more sporty, though that's all done through typical finishing techniques. The window here is smaller than it was on the Frederick Constant, which I'll show you again in a second just for comparison's sake. So you really are focused in on the balance here and this plate underneath the rotor, as well as this rather funky looking rotor design. But underneath the balance, you do have perlage. Around it, this central plate here, you have also perlage, blued screws throughout. And then on the Frederick Constant we saw, they actually had a circular graining here, which has a kind of a more opulent, elegant design. Here this went for a straight parallel line Côte de Genève, and then a black PVD rotor that has a really unique design. I'm sure you've already noticed that's asymmetrical. So there's actually the weight, might be a little hard to see in here, the weight wraps around to about there. though it only has this part of a bridge, so it's kind of skeletonized. So that's why it's not sitting with that straight, because the center of balance is down that line there. And then, so that's black PVD, and it also has Côte de Genève on it, as well as this deeply grained Alpina Genève logo there. So it's just really cool, really beautiful, yet I think masculine, sticking with the brand. Just for comparison's sake, I'll show you. This was the Frederic Constant movement we looked at last week, and you'll see how it's much more elaborate looking, much more decorative, and I think speaks to a dress watch, whereas this speaks to a sport watch more. So I really like that they paid attention there. Now, just talking about the movement briefly, this is a 26 joule automatic movement with a frequency of 28,800 beats per hour. It operates how you would expect. So you get the crown out, you pull it to the first position, turn it away from you, and that will jump the small date. Take it out 2 positions, has a hacking seconds, and you can set the time. On the wrist, the Alpina Startimer pilot manufacturer wears very bold, but very comfortably, actually much more so than I thought it would. I'm not a large watch guy. I made that, I think, pretty clear on our website, and this is a 44 millimeter watch, so personally, I wouldn't be drawn to that, but I've worn this watch quite a lot, and I was actually really surprised at how well it wears, and I almost don't know why it wears quite as well or is as comfortable as it is. I guess 52 millimeters isn't terrible lug to lug. Maybe it's just the way the strap balances it out. But I don't feel like this watch looks too big or feels too big on my wrist, which is 7-inch wrist, and I usually don't go above 42 millimeters for a watch, but I really enjoyed wearing this. I think the presence is really nice. The big bold dial. I mean, this is just it's the proportions you want with a pilot style watch like this. Just super bold and out there. My other concern was with this really large crown, that I thought it might have crown bite, as they call it. And though I have gotten an impression here from time to time, I've never really felt it. You can see if I go like that, it is pushing against my wrist. Any large crown will do that, but it hasn't really hurt at all. So once again, I think just kind of luck of how little things balanced out, that it ends up being a much more wearable, large size watch. Then the look of it, I mean, these watches are just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, if you like this style of watch, you're going to immediately be appealed to what they did here. They kept very true to the modern Flieger style. It's big, it's bold, it's masculine. It's sporty, but at the end of the day, I think it also comes across as quite elegant. I think the little details on the case up that, so it's a real kind of a bit of a gentleman sport watch, though when it's this big, it's definitely still quite bold, a bit of a statement piece. But yeah, overall very attractive. And I do think the anthracite gray dial here adds a little bit to the character. I mean, sure, the black is very nice too, but I personally find just that little bit of glimmer you're getting off the dial here just kind of, livens it up a bit, makes it more dynamic. Goes great with, kind of casual rugged clothing here. Just a simple gray Oxford here. I love the way that looks. I just think it kind of monochromatic, but just very, very nice. It comes on an interesting strap, so it's a 22 millimeter strap that tapers quite dramatically to 18 millimeters, so it's got a very thin look, and as you probably already noticed, it looks like it's backwards. This is how it comes. This is some sort of pilot style. I don't actually know the history behind these backwards straps. It is interesting. It's a little funky looking at first, but it actually makes it kind of easy to get on and off too. So this one does have a deployment clasp that looks like a classic thumbnail buckle, but it is a deployment, so you can just pop it open. So what's nice about this, since it's one-sided, I mean, you just kind of pull it over and snap into place. So it goes on and off very easily. And then the deployment style here, it's not one with a snapping part on it. It just kind of pops in place, so it's really easy to set or change sizes on if you need to. Simple brushed finishing here, but I think really it looks really nice. And then the leather itself on this strap I think is gorgeous. It's a very, 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 very dark gray, but I wouldn't call it black. It's a little bit lighter, so I think that brings out a little bit of the dial here. It looks great with the steel. You have the contrast stitching, and then it's a very heavily textured leather, like a tumbled leather, almost like a bison leather or something like that, though it's probably not bison, but it has that kind of large pebbled look to it, which I think also is just nice and rugged, but at the same time a bit elegant and just very well finished. Yeah, it's just a great strap for this watch. We had to show you the watch on a Nato Strap because, Flieger watches look so great on them, and this is no exception. We have it here on kind of a khaki brown 22 millimeter Nato. As an alternative to the leather strap it comes with, I think this is a great option, definitely good for summer, and it just looks right. I mean, that's totally an awesome looking pairing there. I think that the more aggressive style works with it. It might make it actually, a little bit less comfortable to wear, to be honest, because this is kind of, I feel like the added materials pushing it out, making it feel larger. I am feeling the 44 millimeter size here a bit more, but looks wise, that is just so killer, just a great alternative. So to wrap up, I think the Alpina Startimer pilot manufacturer, like the slimline moon phase we looked at last week, represents an exceptional value for what you're getting. At $2,500, having that manufacturer automatic movement really sets it apart from the competition and really distinguishes it from the kind of higher level luxury brands that for a similar looking watch really even start around $5,000, let alone one with a manufacturer movement, which you'll be pushing $10,000 for. So in that respect, you have a really, really great value piece here. But then if you took the movement out of the equation, I think you just have a really well executed watch, beautiful dial, beautiful case, very, very nice to wear, even despite its large size. Like I said, I was really surprised by how much I liked wearing it and how comfortable it was. So for $2,500, yeah, you are paying a surplus for that manufacturer movement, but in the scheme of horology, I think it makes a lot of sense at that price. And if it doesn't, if that's not your thing, they do have watches with e-brush movements, Solita movements for a lesser price. They have chronographs, they have regulators, they have all sorts of different things in this family, the Startimer family, which is just really cool. They're really trying to push this look. My biggest negative comment about this watch isn't really negative about it itself. It doesn't take away from the pleasure of wearing it. It's that the design at the end of the day is a bit derivative of these, famous Mark series watches. So, I would love to see them do everything they're doing here with a design that's 100% their own. It's still sporty. I think that would just, build the brand more perhaps. But if you're looking for a modern Flieger watch, provenance isn't exactly what you're looking for, so you don't care about these big other brands. This is such an exceptional value and just a beautiful piece. Please read the full review on Worn&Wound. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. Thank you.